Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again, and for the final time, as we are here in the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas, here on the court, a couple hours before Utah State and San Diego State are set to face off in the Mountain West Championship final. And this is going to be interesting because if you look at San Diego State, Utah State's only beat them once since joining the Mountain West. It'll be a really interesting matchup. What do you think?
Yeah, like you say, they've only beaten them one time, and it's funny because these teams almost kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways. They're similar in defensive numbers. They also like to play a similar style of basketball. So I think what happened in that last game where they ended up beating them was they really just played, like I think Diogo Brito mentioned it last night, they played their style of basketball the best they could, and they really came into it hungry, looking like we can win this game, and they had that confidence, and that's what they're going to need tonight as well.
Yeah, and so definitely speaking of playing Aggie basketball, we're going to take a look at last night where Utah State absolutely dominated, blew the doors off of Fresno State, and that was just the definition of Aggie basketball. It was, just 8. So the final score was 85-60, and just a clinic of passing, getting points in the paint. Pretty much everybody got involved, bench or starter. I think everybody on the active roster got on the floor, mostly because it was a blowout. But just what was the key for Utah State in that win against Fresno?
Well, if you had to really pin one thing down, I would say it's getting those stops and not letting Fresno State get out on transition and doing the same for themselves, getting some easy transition buckets. But if you look across the whole box score in the stat sheet, you see they did almost everything right last night. They had 23 assists. They moved the ball well. They shot the ball 40% from three. They held Fresno State, who was the best three-point shooting team in the conference, to shoot just 5 of 26. So really, all around the boards, they did everything just perfectly almost last night.
Yeah, it was about as close you can get to 40 minutes of perfect basketball. They did allow a 10-0 run at the end, but that was also when they kind of started putting their backups in, and you kind of let your foot off the gas when you're up 35 as they were before the last couple of minutes. But let's look at the other game that happened that day. San Diego State played Nevada and upset them. I believe San Diego State's now won 4 out of the last 5 matchups or something to that effect against Nevada, who's been a dominant team for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and what you look at that game when it was at halftime, you would say Nevada is still very much in this, but San Diego State came out. They hit those first 2 threes starting out the second half, really started to pick up some momentum, and then they really kind of just started to get a ton of stops on defense, and that limited Nevada to having some really bad looks. And it wasn't necessarily that San Diego State was doing things right offensively. It was that their defense really just carried them throughout the whole game.
Yeah, and I think it's that resiliency because we were both sitting at that game over there in the other end zone or end line seat, whatever you want to call it. And I was just thinking to myself, as Nevada was starting to make their comeback, and it was tied, and they were up by like 2 or 3, and you think Nevada's got this. And I even tweeted this out: one more push by Nevada, and this game is over. But San Diego State showed resiliency. They were resilient, and they came back, and they ended up winning the game in pretty impressive fashion against a team that's top 15 in the country and been top 10 for most of the season. Just really good job overall.
Yeah, and as much as we've talked about their defense, I will give credit to Devin Watson, who had a really good game last night, had those 20 points leading the team, and he also hit some really big shots late when they did need to get those offensive buckets when Nevada was kind of starting to creep back into the game. And him and also Jalen McDaniels had really good games, and they're their 2 leading scorers. They're their all-caliber, all-conference players, and they're going to have a really good performance tonight too if they want to beat Utah State.
Yeah, you mentioned Devin Watson. You mentioned the 20 points, 4 of 7 from 3, and a couple of those in the second half. There was one that I believe put them back up 2 or maybe tied the game that really halted the run by Nevada and allowed San Diego State to, get their bearings up and, make the run that eventually won them the game. So definitely those 2 will be, 2 big names to watch for, Jalen McDaniels and Devin Watson. But let's continue going backwards in time here, and let's look at the last 2 matchups between San Diego State and Utah State. Now, you hear around some of the media and everybody's tweeting out, they talk about Utah State's won 8 in a row, 15 of their last 16, That last loss that they're kind of jumping over on those 15 of 16 is San Diego State.
None other than San Diego State.
This very team that Utah State will have to beat once again if they want to come out, get an automatic bid, and come away with their first ever Mountain West Championship final. But let's look at that loss and, what stood out to you in that loss there?
Well, what stood out to me, I mean, is the 35 points from Sam Merrill, but nothing else really contributing for the rest of the team. San Diego State did a really good job of getting Sam Merrill to have, the looks he wanted, but limiting the rest of the team and really smothering them on the defensive end and kind of just making it, a really isolated game. And that's not what we saw in the second matchup. What we saw in the second matchup was Sam Merrill, doing a little bit of what we're used to seeing him do, but it was, contributions across the board, and Utah State was able to get a lot of people involved, and I think that's really what paid off for them, got the win in the end.
Yeah, and that's really when Utah State is at their best, is when everybody is involved, because, Sam is capable of going off for those 30-point games. He has, I think, 3 or 4 games of 35-plus points or thereabouts, including San Diego State, but a lot of them aren't necessarily Utah State's best games.
True.
I mean, they're close matchups. You look at San Diego State, a loss. Boise State and Colorado State, really close games where they probably should have won by more, but he had to carry them, which is a good thing for him, and it's the mark of a leader. But, it shows how much he needs a team effort.
And if you look at last night's game, he had 20 points through the first 15 or 20 minutes of play, but then he ended up with only 22 points, and the team won by 25. And I think that's kind of what you want to see out of this Aggies team, is that Sam can get you those buckets when you really need them, but you also want to see everyone getting involved, because that's the kind of brand of basketball that they really like to play. Yeah.
And so one of those things that stood out to me in that San Diego State game, and I was watching it on TV when they were in San Diego, is the 23-0 run that the Aztecs went on.
Yeah.
Because that turned what was an 18-8 game. Utah State up by 10 points, looking to maybe cruise through the first half, maybe get a nice win, and keep what was a 6 or 7 game winning streak, I think, at the time going. And then 23-0 run later, and Utah State's down 31-18. They're down 13 points, which, Utah State ended up coming back, made the first half score pretty close, and the game was only a 5-point game, but I think that really just turned the tide, and I think that's going to be a key in this game, is holding those runs.
Yeah, and San Diego State's capable of going on those runs. They're a good shooting team. I believe they're 2nd or 3rd in the Mountain West in three-point shooting, and they have those guys like Devin Watson, and they play a smaller lineup with a lot of guards that they're capable of making those threes. They're definitely capable of going on those runs, and that's something Utah State has actually done pretty well at limiting for the most part over the year, except for the exception of that one game. But I think that's something that they're going to be confident coming into this game, knowing that they can't let people go out to that run. And, I mean, as well as they played defensively last night, I think they're going to be confident coming into it. Yeah.
And you look at the confidence of this team, I think, really high with the performance of all the different players. Let's look at 2 of those, both coming off the bench. Utah State's had some times where they don't necessarily get a ton of bench production. It's never been bad, but it's been superb in this tournament.
Incredible.
Look at 2 players, Justin Bean and Diogo Brito. How amazing have those 2 been?
Well, I mean, you can't almost even describe how much the impact they've made for this team. Diogo Brito having 34 points combined over the last 2 games, and contributing on the defensive end as well. Justin Bean having that huge game in the first game with 14 and 15. And we're getting a little national anthem preview right here for you Aggies fans. But, yeah, I mean, this bench play has been what's carrying them throughout the whole season. And the fact that it's come up so big at the end is, I mean, that's absolutely amazing for this team.
Yeah, I think, Diogo Brito has definitely been, excellent these last few games. He's averaging 28, almost 29 minutes off the bench, which shows just how much Coach trusts him to bring him off the bench. And he mentioned this yesterday in his comments. It's not necessarily who starts the game, it's who finishes. And, he's finished pretty much every one of these games. You look at his last, I think, 5 games, as I mentioned. Last 5 games, 14.5 points, 5 or 6 rebounds and assists. And so he's just played excellent. And,
Yeah, and I think, we talk about the defensive end, we talk about this and that, but the Aggies bench has been one of the things that's really been elite, something that they've been able to rely on throughout the season. And if we can get another really good game out of Diogo Brito, maybe another really good game out of Justin Bean, the Aggies look to be poised to be in a good position.
Yeah, Justin Bean is one of those guys, really it's hard to describe his story because you look at him, his first 22 games, he hasn't appeared in every game, but in the 22 games he appeared in prior to about, a month ago, he was averaging 9 points per outing, barely playing, averaging, 2 or 3 points, maybe a rebound or 2. But again, in these last 5 games, he's averaging 23 minutes a game, basically the 7th man behind Diogo Brito.
Yeah.
And then he's averaging 7 rebounds, 10 points. He set career highs in points and rebounds during this tournament. So just absolutely stellar play, and you see how much coaches are relying on Bean as well, along with Diogo Brito. So just absolutely stellar play off the bench for those two.
And which is incredible because Coach talked about it a little bit last night that guys like Bean and Brito, were kind of floating around that 10th spot on the roster, and then they finally halfway through the season said, why aren't we playing these guys more? Yeah. And you see the more minutes they've been getting, the contributions that they've been paying to this team.
Yeah, and you look all up and down this roster, the headliners are guys like Sam Merrill, Nemias Keita. They got the first team, second team selections, all Mountain West, Defensive Player of the Year, Freshman Player of the Year, all that. Go down the list of accolades they've gotten and the number of award lists they're going to be on this upcoming, award season nationally.
Yeah.
But you look at guys, it's Diogo Brito, Justin Bean, Abel Porter is another guy you mentioned early on this season. Coach Miz is like, why aren't we playing him? Then they did, and I think since they started him, they're on roughly this 15 out of 16 game win streak.
Yeah.
And just keep going on the list. There's just so many contributors on this team that have turned what was predicted to be the 9th best team in the Mountain West to potentially the best team.
Incredible.
It is absolutely incredible. That's really the only way to describe it. But let's move on, start to wrap this up with some predictions. What do you think is going to happen?
We've been wildly wrong a couple times on this show, and I'm going to have to stick with my gut and say it will be another low-scoring game. The last two matchups, these are two really good defenses. I'm going to say it's going to be Utah State 71, San Diego State 65.
I'm going to disagree in it being a low-scoring game, mostly because I think Utah State's offense has just been on a roll. They scored 91 points the other night, 85 the other night, and they didn't even try for the last 3 minutes, and they scored 85. So I'm going to say that they get up into the 80s again. I'm going to say 86, and then San Diego State will say 79. I think they'll have a pretty good game. They're pretty hot in this tournament, but I do think Utah State is the better team, and if they play the way they should, they will come out with a big win here.
Yeah.
All right. So that'll wrap it up for us here. I'm Jason Walker, joined by Dalton Renshaw. Now, one thing really quick before we leave, the Utah Statesman Bracket Challenge is going up pretty soon. They confirmed the prizes for us actually just after we filmed yesterday.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, I believe, like some of the grand prizes, I think a Nintendo Switch and
Apple AirPods.
Yeah, Apple AirPods. I think an Amazon gift card.
Yeah.
So some big prizes up at stake. If you think you can predict the tournament, go to Utah Statesman. Keep an eye out for when they release the bracket. Obviously, it'll come out after Selection Sunday. So,
well, should we make a couple quick predictions where Utah State might finish the season if they end
yeah. Let's see. I don't know what seed they might be. The thing is, they might go as high as, I'm thinking 7. I don't know if they can sneak into a 6 seed even with the win. I think that would have had to happen if they beat Nevada, which is unfortunately off the table.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if they lose, I don't think they fall any further than maybe the 10th spot, and I think they're probably floating right around that 7th spot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think now that they've won gotten to the championship, I don't know if they could fall as far as 10. Although it depends. I'm not in the minds of the selection committee, so. We never know.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think somewhere in that 7 to 9 range, which would be amazing if they got a 7 or an 8, because that would be the first time ever that I'm aware of that they would be the favorite in a NCAA tournament game. So that would be spectacular.
A perfect end to, incredible season.
Yeah, it would be. And it's the dream of, Sam Merrill. He's said over and over, he came here to play in the NCAA tournament. He came to college basketball to get into the big dance, the dream of all college players. All right, we'll see how that goes. Tip-off is at 3 local time, 4 p.m. Mountain time, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you so much, and we will talk to you later.
Bye.